Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Danielle Lee. I'm Managing Editor at Accounting Today, and I'll be your moderator today. And now we'll kick off today's webinar, How People First Firms Attract and Keep Top Talent with Rusty Fulling and Christy Basuya. And we would like to thank Canopy for sponsoring today's event. And just to start off, we're going to kick into some questions. We all know that there's a talent shortage happening right now in the accounting profession. Rusty, I'm going to start with you. How has the talent shortage affected how you approach hiring at your firm?
Hey, Danielle. Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah,
And
definitely. I
I'm
think we've
sorry,
all.
if you guys could introduce yourselves at first.
Oh,
I'm
sure,
sorry, I skipped
sure.
over that part.
Yeah,
Give us some
and
background.
that's Rusty Fulling, founder of Fulling Management and Accounting, and we started back 25 years ago before there was a shortage of good talent out there, and so it's been interesting, to kind of see some of the just the nuances of today's recruiting. And what's interesting, it's definitely not limited to the accounting industry. As we're talking to other industries about this as well. But I think it's a great opportunity to really get innovative on how we go to market. And for us, one of the things we've found helpful is really going virtual. In what we deliver is more virtual CFO services, and it's really helped open our pool of candidates versus being in one area. The other thing that we've found helpful in adapting is really creating more of that flexible, even fractional model for our team members bringing on. And so I think it's just finding ways. We can't do business the way we used to do all the years, and it's just finding new ways to do that. And so the last thing I'll mention around this is just being proactive, constantly be recruiting in social media and just the things you're doing day in, day out. So those would be a few ways that we've adapted.
Great, thank you. And Christy, I'm going to ask you from a broader HR perspective what strategies firms should be considering. But can you also first introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Thank you for having me, Danielle. Christy Busia, founder and CEO of Next Conversation Consulting, where we've been doing this for over 26, 27 years. And our whole mission is to help organizations create cultures where their top talent loves to work, because we know that actually impact the bottom line. You'll reduce turnover, and it's just going to be the competitive edge, that advantage that that companies and firms need nowadays. So from a broader perspective, Rusty, you stole some of my thunder. In terms of things that we see to make culture a competitive advantage, and to attract and retain that talent. One is definitely get more creative in terms of where you find your talent. So not just, it's not just LinkedIn. That's not where people are hanging out like lately nowadays. You actually may have to go to other social media platforms like an Instagram, a TikTok, to be able to highlight the good things that you're doing, because that's where the candidates are living nowadays. Even Facebook, and looking at what Facebook groups you might be able to target. There's an entire organization that helps moms returning to work to find fractional work or find jobs, and there's a lot of accountants on that platform as well. So look for those other places in addition to the historically used sites. And then the last thing I want to highlight on this from a broader perspective is also think more broadly about who you're looking for from a candidate pool. So not just looking for the skill sets, can they do the role, but also looking for, are they technologically capable? The technology keeps shifting so often that you need to find those who are able to adapt and adjust with that. And then the third part of the formula that we use is adding in the growth mindset. The latest research shows that, and it keeps shrinking year by year, and it's staggering to see, the half-life of technology capability has actually shrunk to 2.5 years. So technology is out of date in about 2.5 years. So if you're not hiring for those who are technologically capable and have a growth mindset, in 2.5 years, guess what? You're going to have another problem of turnover, or especially if you haven't developed them along the way.
Great. And speaking of hiring people that have different expectations, obviously there's more remote hiring going on. Rusty, when you're looking to hire remotely across the country, how are you looking to kind of balance the speed of getting these people hired and then making sure you're finding the right people?
Oh my, yeah, you're hitting a pain point. Our first 10 years, we hired, I think, with one interview, and of course, our turnover was highest, in our history. And so, I think when we talk about when desperation drives, frustration quickly follows, and so some of that is slowing down to speed up, and what that looks like is defining the process of what is our hiring process. And I think what was just mentioned is who's your ideal client, or who's your ideal candidate. Sometimes we miss that in the process. And so for us, it's just looking at some of those kind of things and how do we put those in place? How do we develop that process? The other thing that we've noticed in this market is there's a little bit of speed that the candidate's expecting. They don't want to wait 6 months to get the offer, and so what we've said is, hey, we have a 2 week window, and so within that 2 weeks, we talk about with those candidates, here's the 5 things that you should expect, and be very clear on those 5 things, so they know, I'm in step 3, I'm in step 4, step 5. That's the invite to join the team. So it's that communication with our internal team and external team that's really helped in managing that speed versus quality.
Great. And staying on this topic, Christy, what are the risks that firms face when they're kind of prioritizing maybe speed over finding the right candidates?
Mm. Huge risk that you absolutely face by putting speed over the right candidate is that your company has a culture and you have your mission, your vision, your values. If you prioritize that speed over getting and happy ears of, and look, we've been guilty of it too. Candidate looks great, sounds great, but we don't do poke and prod a little bit more to make sure that they're a right fit and they actually want to do what we're asking them to do. You actually have two byproducts that happen. One, turnover, because either you realize they're not a good fit for the job or the company culture, or two, they self-select out and they're gone within the first 60 days, and they're going to the next company that they were also interviewing for. And if they happen to stay, the biggest risk that companies run, and I see this quite often, is you actually may start to create countercultures or microcultures, and you may actually start to change your culture and evolve it, and you haven't even known that. So I would, our suggestion, what we work with clients on is truly look at who fits the company culture and where you're headed, and then layer on, do they have the skills? Are they able to grow with you and help you move that in the right direction? Because I'll be honest, having a counterculture to opposite of what you want, it's like turning the Titanic. So just don't even let the Titanic go in that direction.
Great. Well, thank you both for the great insights. We have more coming, but first, it is time for your first polling question. We are asking, how confident are you in your current hiring process? You have 4 choices here: very confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, we don't really have a process. So once again, select out of the 4 options which best describes your level of confidence in your current hiring process. So this should be interesting to gauge from today's audience. 4 choices: very confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, we don't really have a process. As we mentioned, it's an interesting climate right now for hiring, so I'm sure everyone's facing challenges with that. So we'll see how everyone responds to how they're feeling about their hiring process within their firm currently. And I'll make sure to give everyone adequate time to get those responses in before we go back to our presentation. Give everyone a final 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. somewhat confidence the winner, just over half. So kind of in the middle there. That's a good sign, trending in the right direction. And now back to the presentation. We're going to move, we kind of started touching on culture with the last question. We're going to move into culture more holistically. Um, Culture itself has become a competitive advantage for firms, obviously, and they're looking for more than just great salary flexibility. That's kind of a baseline for employees at this point. Christy, in your work with organizations, how do you help them define and strengthen their culture?
Great question, Danielle. When we partner with organizations, we actually start with what do they want to who do they want to be, and how do they want to be known, and that could be the mission, the vision, the values, and then we also dive into, first, know what your target is. What in the world are you trying to get to? Then we start to ask, well, where are you now? What are you seeing? What behaviors, what actions, what processes, what systems? And then we can help them do a gap analysis to see what's on target, what's off target, and what may have left the building and is nowhere near the target. And that actually then helps to inform strategies to help create a holistic, simple, scalable, sustainable solution that they can then chip away and start moving things back in the right direction, or in the direction that they're already going and they want to double down on. But there are some key things to keep in mind of doing that. One thing we highlight for our clients is that culture is caught, not taught. So while we talk about culture, it's not by the words that we say, it's the action. It's every single action that we do. It's every single process system. So we watch what people are doing around us to determine the direction that we should go, because we're wired to want to go with the group and not go against it, because that's extremely uncomfortable. So how do we help look at everything with a fine-tooth comb to see where there may be opportunities? But for organizations, I just tell them, be curious. Why did things why is it the way it is? Because there's a reason for it. If you want to change it, you've got to be very consistent, and keep doing it. And then also make it personal, because these are humans talking to humans. You're all working together, and you're all going to help create that momentum in whichever direction that is.
Thanks, Christy. And Rusty, to Christy's point about action, what actions are you taking and what else are you doing to make your culture attractive?
Yeah, I think, boy, Kirsty has some great things there. One of the things we had noticed is about 15 years ago, we found our original core values, and we dusted those off and thought, well, how can we start actually applying these core values, or and living those out? And through that process, we kind of tweaked those and said, okay, here's what our values are all about. And it's been amazing, the candidates that come to us for different roles that we may post, those that comment on our core values, and it becomes an attractional tool versus oh yeah, that, us too kind of tool. And so definitely spend time on your core values and make sure they're applicable to really what you're living out. I think that's been so helpful. And then another just practical thing was really identifying our ideal client. And because you may have an incredible internal culture, but if your clients don't align with that, that's going to be painful. And so making sure, even when you're bringing on new clients, that they're all in on your core values. And so those are a couple of things that have been helpful. And then I love the stories from our team members when they're talking about our culture and how it's impacted them personally and professionally. In fact, I think one of the links, or a couple of links, I think somebody had asked about handouts. We actually share our core values, I think, is one of the links you can take a look at. And also one of our stories, our videos from one of our team members, just talking about the impact of the values that in the culture that we've been able to develop. So those are a couple of things. And then in the interview process, so if you're interviewing someone, in fact, we just brought on a new team member recently, and one of the questions that we often get in those interviews to our team is, what's it like to work here? Or what do you best like about this? And when our team members are sharing hey, I love the culture. Here's what it's all about. That's what you want. You want people, really excited about the culture versus, yeah, we do this too. So the more we can do that, share those on social media. And last thing I'll mention is one thing to reinforce that is each week we get together as a staff and we'll do raving fan awards. And what that is when clients are contacting us and saying, hey, Danielle knocked it out of the park this week for me. I just wanted you to know. And so we want to make sure we're reinforcing those so people are saying, these are important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. It's very good
You bet.
advice. And Christy, obviously, every firm is kind of promoting that they have a great culture. You can see that on any kind of accounting firm website. Everyone's going to promote that. But what does it mean if there's a difference between what they're claiming to have as a great culture and if it's not matching an employee's actual experience on the day to day?
Oh, well, it has a lot of ramifications. One, which Rusty actually just highlighted in the interviewing process. Some of the work we do is actually help folks to find employment in addition to some working with organizations. And we actually tell them to ask that question, Rusty. So that's us telling them to ask about the company culture and what they love about it and what drew them to it. And it's a huge miss for you and your organization when those who are answering, if there's deer in the headlights or they're like, oh, and they don't want to answer it, then you know that the culture on paper is not how the culture is. But if they start getting excited and they can't wait to tell you all about the culture, now you know that they're living it. It's not just on paper or the plaque on the wall, that it is actually how they show up day to day. And it is a huge, huge, huge attraction for candidates that want to be part of that culture. And it also, it helps you to set yourself apart from the competition because your employees are so excited about the work that they do and where they work that they can't help but show that when they're in the interviewing process. When they come on board, the challenge of having it on paper but not in real life, or having pockets of culture and counterculture, you now get what Gallup just launched their 2025 State of the Workforce report. No, nothing has shifted. There's still a lot of quiet quitting. There's still a lot of disengaged employees. That's what you end up getting when they say, well, do as I say, well, paper on the wall, but not as I do of how we act. You now have cognitive dissonance for all of these employees. And sometimes you're going to lose your top talent because they recognize or realize this isn't what I signed up for and I don't want to be here anymore. So you also may lose productivity because when quiet quitting happens, that means that they're going to just do the bare minimum. So you're not going to maximize effectiveness. You're not going to get innovation, not going to get creativity. So there's a lot to lose, but there's so much more to gain by living the values, for not just on paper, but in everything that you do, as Rusty was saying. And one thing I'll leave you with on this one is when those two things don't match, you actually can leave a lot of brilliance hidden, all these little hidden gems in the company because people aren't either feeling comfortable to share or don't feel part of or feeling a little disjointed. Don't let any brilliance get lost in the mix of your firm.
Great, great advice, Christy. And Rusty, when we're talking about culture, it's obviously huge for retention of employees, but how do you find it helps with the attracting and recruiting of employees?
Oh, yes. Well, a lot of things when you're attracting and recruiting, again, is going to kind of come from your current team. But I'll go back to real quick on the core values, making those portable, meaning make them where a team member can say, yeah, here's our core values, boom, 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 boom. And don't make them too complicated. And so I think that's definitely part of it. But the other thing we've seen in that culture and attracting new team members is it defines your identity. It really says who you are and what you stand for. And so there's just something different if you can stand out in a world of every other accounting group. It just makes a huge difference. It also builds trust among your team and new team members and clients, because again, if they know this is our consistent, what we believe in, what we adhere to. I think Patrick Lencioni, author Lencioni, talks about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and trust is the foundation before you can even go further. And so again, builds that trust. And then it really becomes a filter for decision making when you have a good culture. We had a team member working with a client this week who they said it was so easy to use our core values to help this client work through this issue because they had something consistent they knew they could go back to. And then last thing I'll mention, again, when you're retaining, it just multiplies that alignment. Everybody knows this is what we do and everybody's in alignment with those. And if they're not, they can opt out, and it's an easy opt out because here's what we're all about. So yeah, definitely these are areas to spend time in, even before the putting the ad in the proverbial paper, for that new team member.
Great, thanks, Rusty. And before we had discussed remote hiring. Going back to kind of the newer, more remote workforce, how do you maintain a strong culture when everyone's not always in the same office? Rusty, I'll ask you this: How have you kind of maintained a strong culture in a more remote environment?
Yeah. So we were all in the same office for the first 20 years, and I think it's interesting. I think we've been more intentional about the culture since we've gone virtual, and we went virtual right in the midst of COVID, and so it's just been interesting to begin. How can we make this work well? I'd kind of boil it down to 3 I's. I would say invest, incorporate, and invite. And what invest looks like is invest in your team weekly. And so what that may look like in our organization is we'll do shout outs and leadership lessons in our staff meetings every single week. So shout out could be, another team member just saying, again, Danielle did this great thing, got to work with her on this, or just something that's, again, building up maybe another team member. Creating margin. When people are working from home, sometimes you get those that don't know how to shut it off. And that means they're working all hours, and then sometimes you get the other, but the idea is help create margin. So make sure, so we actually ask our team members, hey, what's your workload been like this week? What's your stress level been like this week? And so sometimes it's just an easy ask. And then celebrate the weekly wins. What's gone well for you this week? And then one of the things, in fact, we were talking to our team this week about this is, what are some of the values that you're seeing in this? And one said, I love the daily check-ins with another team member, because again, if you're in a remote environment, isolation is real, and so finding those ways, again, that's part of the investing weekly. Incorporate fun and serving opportunities together. Just because you're not in person together doesn't mean you can't have fun. And we have some of the most incredible virtual Christmas parties you'll ever see. It's just neat finding ways to be creative. And we're not using accountants for that, so we bring in people for that, but finding ways to be innovative in that. And then serving, you can do serve opportunities. Like we're doing a 6K for a group called World Vision, I think next weekend, to raise money for clean water in some areas. And so we have team members all around the country doing this with their families. And so again, incorporate fun and serving opportunities. And the last thing I'll mention is invite to in-person events. So we'll fly all of our team members into Kansas City, where we're kind of based out of, once a year for a family picnic, a strategy and team building day, and then a serve event in the community. So kind of a 3-day offsite. So those would be some things that, again, we've seen some companies doing that, and we just said, hey, how can we do that as well?
Great. Rusty shared some great examples: shout outs, check-ins, in-person celebrations, serving opportunities. Are there other best practices that you would recommend to keep remote and hybrid teams feeling engaged and involved?
Absolutely. Well, I do want to just give a shout out, Rusty. What you're doing is definitely some of the best practice things that we've seen, and we've seen it with our own clients as well. So even one of our clients was all remote, and came out of COVID. They were all remote. They didn't really know each other. People were onboarded that had never met each other in person ever. And one thing that they did that really, really catapulted productivity and team building and bonding was they just did a one day offsite where they had a chance to just get to know each other. We layered in personalities and styles, and how to communicate better with one another and get to and literally just meet each other, because that connection does create a bond or a bridge for that does facilitate the offline conversations or the virtual conversations. One thing in Gallup's latest poll, they found that even though remote workers have higher engagement scores, they actually have lower well-being scores, meaning because they're not tied to or connecting with other people regularly like we would in the office around a water cooler or casually, we have to find ways to actually create that environment. So one of the companies that I work with, they use Slack, and the Slack channels, and I'm invited to them, and we just have fun, and they just blow up with just fun facts of there's a whole group at Disney right now and they're sending pictures, but they're making it more personal. It's not a channel just for channel. It's not a monitor thing that you have. It's just get to know each other and really connect like you would in the office. I would echo what he said in terms of communication and make it consistent. So whatever you do, make it consistent. Keep one-on-ones. If you have them, keep them. Do not push them off. Do not defer them. Have them consistently so that somebody does know face to face they're going to get that engagement. Team meetings, same thing. I would also say if I definitely think use the technology that we now have available. It's just insane and amazing what we have at our fingertips. So whether that's Teams, that's Slack, that's any of the other ones, pick one. But or even WhatsApp. One of my global clients, they use WhatsApp groups and channels, and they just use that to build a connection, because we have found that when you do get people together, you start talking about things, you start to make it personal and get to know each other. You're really going to build that bridge, increase well-being so that they don't feel alone and isolated.
Great. And Rusty, you had already touched on a lot of the ways you're keeping your team connected. Are there other habits and traditions that you use to keep that connection across hybrid or remote environments?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what Christy was talking about earlier is it is interesting if you're doing these weekly investments when you do get together. It blew me away the first time our team came together once we were remote. It felt like an old high school reunion in a good way. I mean, it was just everybody's coming together, and I scheduled 15 minutes for kind of a reconnect, and I think it was an hour and a half long, and like, oh my goodness. So definitely, those are definitely worth investing in. I will say one of the things that we've found really helpful is in our weekly staff meetings is spending time doing some education, some leadership training, and then breaking into small groups and having discussion time and then coming back. And these can be all kinds of culture or leadership kind of lessons. What I would say is make sure you're making your meetings worth attending. And I've been to those staff meetings where you're like, oh, this is a waste of time. And I'll tell you, I was kind of reaffirmed my passion for our staff meetings when one of our team members just recently was in the hospital, and she jumped on staff meeting without her video, but she goes, I get so much value out of this. I just wanted to be part of the discussion. And I thought, oh my goodness, so that it just meant so much for her to be part of the team that even when she was laid up, she just wanted to connect a little bit there. So I think that personal stories, as leaders, sometimes our team doesn't get to hear our story. And so that's some of the feedback I've heard, not only from my leadership, but others. And so each week now, I'll share a personal story and typically tie it to one of our culture lessons or one of our leadership lessons. And again, that's some of the feedback we've gotten from our team that says, well, that's really helpful. I get to know my leader better, and I get to engage and maybe learn a little bit more about that. Last thing I'll mention again in that remote environment is people want to know that their work matters, that they're making a difference. And so it's funny, we had just moved to a new workflow management system right before we went virtual. And we use Canopy, for example. And just using something like that makes it so easy to be able to work together on those kind of things. So if you do go to a virtual model, make sure you're doing something that, again, makes work visible, because people want to say, hey, here's where I'm at, or hey, here's an area I'm struggling in that I could use some help. So those are some things that have been helpful for us.
Great. Thank you, Rusty. And,
You
and
bet.
Christy, for a good tone at the top, how would you recommend leaders kind of model the sort of behavior that reinforces the strong culture they're trying to build day to day?
I'm going to sound like a broken record on some things. One, be consistent in how you show up as a leader. So when you have the values and how you live those out, if you're doing it, make sure it's consistent across interactions, because at one time that it's counter, you get the raised eyebrow of, wait, what's going on? And then you see it again and again, and you wonder, what is the right thing to do as I say, not as I do? What does that look like? And I would also say, as leaders, stay curious in why people are responding or behaving the way they are, and modeling the culture or the behaviors. They may have absolutely no clue that they are saying or doing something that is not aligned to the values or the culture you're trying to drive. If For those of you who I'm a psychology geek by heart. There's this fabulous video on YouTube, Brain Games Doctor's Office Visit. Look, it's a fantastic experiment of how quickly we conform or go with or against the social norm. So for the highlight of it is that there's this young lady who is not in on the experiment. Every time a noise went off, everybody around her stood up. And after a while, she's like, what is going on? And she finally stood up, not knowing exactly why she's doing it. And over time, all the experimenters left the room, and new people that had no idea what was going on also came in. And you wonder, is everybody else going to stand? Is she going to stand up again? Nobody's there. Is she going to make them stand up? And nobody's there. Nobody said or did anything. But by the time the video is done, all these people had already changed their behavior, were standing up every time they heard this sound go off. So culture truly is caught, not taught. We watch what people say, we watch what people do. So as a leader, you have to catch the culture, and you have to share it in a way that you want it to be picked up by somebody else. And stay curious if you're getting a different reaction than you thought, so that you can learn where there may be a little micro counterculture brewing, so that you can get it back onto track.
Great. Thank you both for the great advice, and much more advice to come. But first, it is time for the next polling question. We're going to catch your responses here to this next question. How would you describe your firm's culture? Your choices here are strong, good but needs work, bad, or unsure / we haven't really focused on it. So kind of looking inwardly, how you would describe the current culture at your firm. You have 4 choices here. Please click the one that best describes your current firm culture. As everyone gets those responses in, we have some really great questions coming in through the Q&A panel, so thank you for that. If you'd like to ask any questions yourself, you can input those at any time during the presentation. We should have some time reserved at the end to address some of those questions, and thank you everyone that's input those so far. And speaking of inputting, please select your response now and click submit to make sure your poll response goes through. Once again, how would you describe your firm's culture? Strong, good but needs work, bad, or unsure, we haven't really focused on it. I'll give everyone a final few moments to get those responses in. We'll see how it shakes out. A final 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good but needs work, about half. So everyone's in the right place to find out how they can kind of strengthen it even more, make it even better. And on that topic, let's get to practical steps for strengthening firm culture. Rusty, what's one thing you would recommend that's made a real impact at your firm in terms of strengthening culture?
Yeah, I'd say go to Christy's email address, and that would be the good starting point. But that would be true. But one of the things that he's asking that, I was thinking of one exercise that we went through that was really helpful, not only from a culture standpoint, but just operations. And it's an exercise called the 4 helpfuls. And we actually do this now with our entire team. We'll get together and go over this as part of our annual offsite. But we'll ask, what's working? So what's working within the firm? Within our culture? What's broken? what's missing, and what's confusing. And just asking those 4 questions and then tracking those year over year, it's fascinating to see, you want to, begin improving those areas or multiplying those that are working. And so that again can give you some good starting points in which to hear from everyone, because sometimes some of the best information that can make the real impact come from the front line that's doing the day to day that, sometimes we don't always get to hear from.
Great. And you've shared a lot of great advice here, almost to the point it can feel overwhelming for firms that are looking to kind of make their culture better. It can make them feel very energized and excited about it, but can also be overwhelming. So, Christy, for firms that are feeling that way and are kind of unsure where to start, what's kind of a good first step that you would recommend?
I love that. I love that you asked that question and that you acknowledge that it can feel overwhelming if you are good and you want to get great, well, how do I do that, right? So that because there's culture is it's a very broad thing, and it's encompassed of every process, every system, every interaction, every behavior. The first thing I would say is similar to what Rusty was saying is where do you want to be? That's of course the first thing. You've got to know what culture you're trying to create, but where are you now? So what information do you have? What data can you point to, whether that's engagement scores, turnover data, your cost to hire, cost to retain clients, any and everything is a clue that can help you in places to start. And then look at that information, partner with folks to really crack that open and prioritize what's going to make the biggest bang for the buck and have the biggest ROI to start. One of my clients, they actually had two competing cultures internally. In one group, they had a very toxic, top-down approach, which had created a fear-based culture. And an entire department, they had this kind, caring, energizing, engaging culture, and the leader was fighting against the major culture. So we started with helping bolster that one leader, who then bolstered her entire leadership team. And then a year later, actually not even a year later, we're working with the entire leadership team for the whole organization, because everybody looked and said, "Ooh, I like that culture over there. How do we get that?" And so you want to start where you can. There is no one size fits all on culture change, but know your numbers, know where you're starting, so that at least you can then, to Rusty's point, come back later and see, did I make a difference? Have we started to move the needle in the right way?
Great. And you mentioned, Christy, collecting data, collecting feedback. How important is that feedback in terms of improving culture?
It depends on how you use it. It's the employee feedback, and the feedback is vital to be able to get that feedback and create those open channels of communication. And I will say there's several caveats with that. One, looking at that data objectively and saying, is this feedback in alignment with our culture and where we're driving the company? And deciding is it going to move us in that direction or not? And staying curious. There's a reason somebody is giving you that feedback, and there may be something that may be a counterculture or something we unintentionally said or did that looks different than what we're trying to say. So stay curious and really pull that layer back. But the most important thing is, if you're going to ask for that feedback, be prepared to take action on it. Because the worst thing that could happen for a company is, and I see this quite a bit with some clients, you get your engagement scores back and you don't hear the results until 6 to 9 months later, and that leaves a void and a vacuum of people wondering, was my voice heard? Are they taking that into account? They don't feel valued, seen, heard, or respected, and then the likelihood of them giving more feedback in the future really, really decreases exponentially from there. So get it, do something with it, and see if it's in the right direction. And always stay curious as to where it's coming from, just to make sure you've got all the information before you take action.
Great. And Rusty, how do you stay personally connected to your team and reinforce the culture day to day? I know you've shared a lot of what you're doing at your firm to reinforce and build such a strong culture. But what else can you share about how you've succeeded in that?
Yeah, and as people maybe listen to some of these going, well, that's a lot of stuff. Just start with one. Don't do everything that Christy and I are talking about today. Just start with one. And honestly, that's how we've done it over the years. Is we just looked at others that we just really look up to and go, wow, what are they doing that we could copy? One of the things that we found real helpful is day one, we'll ask people for a profile. We call it a team member profile. And it may have their favorite Starbucks drink. It may have their favorite restaurant. Just some of those things that how do they like to be acknowledged as far as praised if they did something well. Some people like they want to be up on stage. Others want a quiet proverbial pat on the back. And so I think that's helpful, is knowing how people want to be connected with. And the other thing I've found really fascinating is a simple gesture of knowing what's going on and maybe acknowledging that. It could be maybe somebody has lost a family member, just flowers. That used to be the norm, and surprisingly it's not anymore. But a gift, a handwritten note, something to acknowledge maybe something that's really going well, or maybe a tragedy. I think the other thing that we've seen really helpful, and again we copied this from another group, is our team members every pay period will submit a high for the pay period and a low for the pay period. Hey, what's something that really went well? And sometimes it'll be a business thing. Hey, this thing went well, or maybe it's a family thing. And sometimes the low could be, again, a family or business thing. But especially in a virtual environment, but even in person, sometimes that's the best way, or people are most comfortable sharing some of those really big things that they're not going to come in your office, or, hey, can we jump on a Zoom call? And just, I think Christy mentioned, if you get those kind of things, boy, you better reach back out and say, hey, I'm so sorry you guys are going through this, or, hey, that's so cool, your kid hit the home run. And so highs and lows, just being connected, so important. And then the last thing I'll mention is, again, if you're in town with your team, do this. If you're not, find ways to do this. Going to games, going to kids games, going to kids events for your team members, doing things that they would like to have you at. It's been, we've scored so many points, we'll say, just getting to hang out with somebody at a ball field and watching their kids play ball. And so the more you can just invest in your team for things that's important to them, again, that you're invited into, boy, take advantage of those. That's huge.
Great advice, Rusty. And now it is time for the final polling question. We are asking, what's one area of your firm's culture you'd like to improve? And maybe you came into today's webinar thinking one area, and maybe your mind has been changed a little bit, or you've had some of this discussion has provoked some other areas that you've decided you maybe need to improve in your firm. But either way, at this moment, please select one of the 4 choices that best describes the area of your firm's culture you would like to improve. Your choices here are communication, collaboration and trust, work-life balance, recognition, and feedback. Rusty and Christy, I'd ask you where you think firms should focus, but I'd imagine kind of all of these are good areas to to address. So I'm sure we'll probably see a good spread in where people think they should improve their firm's culture. Again, it's communication, collaboration and trust, work-life balance, recognition, and feedback. All very important areas. So we'll give everyone adequate time to get those responses in. As you do, just a reminder, we should have ample time for questions after we get out of this polling question. So please, there's still time to submit those in the Q&A panel. You can get some great expert advice from Christy and Rusty while they're here at the end of the presentation. But first, let's close out this polling question. I'll give everyone a final 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And communication kind of came out on top, but as we kind of predicted, all of the categories have a good showing here, which is great. And before we start addressing some of the questions in the Q&A panel, I just want to give Christy and Rusty a chance. Any maybe not exactly closing thoughts, but any other thoughts you have that maybe we haven't addressed yet that you would want to impart to today's attendees. Otherwise, we can dive into the questions.
I'll just jump in there real fast. I would just echo what Rusty was saying in terms of start small and then move fast and then continue to scale it. So don't feel that you have to boil the ocean. Your culture did not evolve to what it is overnight, and it's not going to change overnight. And so all it takes is, it's like a ripple on the water. You just have to throw that rock in and start the movement and start the momentum. Just start somewhere and be very intentional and very consistent on it. And that'll start moving you in the right direction.
Great,
Yeah,
great advice.
great. Yeah, really good input. And the thing I would have there is I think community. Don't forget about community and learning from others. I mean, webinars like this are great to get information, but if you're not involved in like roundtables or advisory groups, especially as leaders, it's just so helpful to hey, what are you doing in this area, in this area, and how are you managing the culture piece? And so learn from others. That was one of the feedback I got from our team when they're like, okay, what can improve our leadership? And it's learning from outside our walls, not inside.
Great. Thank you both. We have a great question that came in. They are saying, we are also a 100% remote firm. We think good training helps culture and connectedness, but it is very hard with employees spread out all over the world. Any suggestions on what a good remote training process would look like?
Absolutely. I can give you one real life example right now. Well, for the last couple of years, I have an entire global organization. None of them work in the same office or even the same country. And so what we have done for them is to do what Rusty has said, is to build the training and build that community piece in. So we have everything that comes alongside it, mentors from the organization to help support them, that can help them struggle or wrestle with the things that they're trying to apply. We have coaches that they can tap into to get some expert guidance and advice. But when we create and structure the training programs themselves, it is less of us talking and it is more of them engaging. So we drop in concepts, but then we let them go into breakout rooms where they can come on camera, come off mute, they can really share and get to know each other. And I will tell you, last year's cohort, by the time we were done with the whole session, it was, to Rusty's point, it was like a reunion. Every time they got on the call, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in forever. And it built that community across the world and across time zones. So bake that in, but then bake in all the support so that it's not a vacuum in between the sessions.
Great. Rusty, do you have any advice on the training remotely front?
Yeah, well, and I think Christy's remarks were great, and I think something like that. Yeah, depending on the size of your firm, we had a real life example. We had a team member that for 2 years lived all around the world, and so literally they'd jump on staff meeting. I'd go, "Oh, where are you at today?" Question, and so it was fun. We just made it fun. But we put some parameters around that where we found a time that worked, for everyone to meet versus, yeah, we're going to meet at midnight, this week. So again, that consistency, this is our meeting time. And then in that's trainings and different things, but that was helpful. So again, depending on the size of your team and the dynamics, it could be very video driven, a lot of, emails, those kind of things. But boy, the more you can do what Christy was talking about, engaging live, that's again where the magic happens. So
great, thanks, Rusty. And just a reminder that there's a content section where you can go for all links and downloads. I know we have a lot of people in the Q&A panel asking for Rusty and Christy's contact information, which is great. So you can find all the information there. And as we get towards the end of the hour, I just want to, this time for an actual final thoughts as we get towards the end, if there's any kind of imparting thoughts, any wisdom, Rusty and Christy, you can share before we officially close out today's session? I know we've covered a lot already, so.
Yeah, I was trying to check the Q&A here and follow some of the notes. Yeah, and I think somebody may have mentioned opportunity versus a problem. We had a business owner that said, "I'm just choosing not to participate in the shortage," and that sounded pretty bold. But their point was, how do I turn this into an opportunity and find new ways to find good team members? So I think again, be innovative. Yeah, be innovative in your recruiting. So
Absolutely.
And my last parting thought is something that we're seeing quite a bit in organizations is we now have some multi-generational workforces, and sometimes up to 5 different generations in the same workforce. I would say as you're building your culture and you're looking for that towards that future, I would engage everybody at all levels in every perspective to really help craft what that's going to look like, not just for today, but for your firm of the future. And everybody's putting their heads together, really going to help you get super creative and innovative on how you drive that forward. Because what we're seeing and we're hearing is generations that are coming into the workforce are looking at cultures and saying, that's not what I want to join. And so how do you help involve them to help shift that and evolve that over time? But then we're also seeing and hearing that they're saying in the same breath that if that's the type of leader I need to be, I don't want to be that. So we're going to have not just the staffing shortage here in the next several years, we're also going to have a leadership shortage because we don't have anybody to succeed them. So involve all of your employees to really get to the heart of it, not just for today, but look down the road as to where you want to take it and how you want to get there. Knowing you are turning the Titanic, it doesn't change overnight. Just start somewhere.
Great. And I want to share one piece of wisdom from the Q&A panel. Someone said they view the talent shortage as a glass half full opportunity. And I think with all of the wisdom and the insights and advice that you both have shared, that's kind of true, that there's a lot firms can do to kind of take advantage of the current climate and strengthen their culture. I think it's a good sign, everyone that's on this webinar, that there's a strong enough culture that they're looking to improve even more. So hopefully everyone has some good takeaways from today's presentation about how they can go back to their firm and make their culture even better. Lots of great anecdotes and wisdom shared today. So Rusty and Christy, thank you so much for sharing all your insights and experience. I want to thank Canopy again for sponsoring today's event. And I want to thank you all for attending. Thank you all so much for being here and being so engaged. Thank you.